Type 1 diabetes is the juvenile diabetes, so normally people are diagnosed when they're younger, in their teens or way younger. So it's just when your pancreas basically says nope. Your pancreas just stops working, well, it stops producing insulin, and I don't know. I believe that it's I know that it's an autoimmune disorder, so your blood cells actually attack your pancreas and shut it down, and that's why it stops working. So I don't remember a whole ton about when I actually found out. I was diagnosed when I was 1.5 years old, so I've had it literally my entire life. I do know my parents tell me stories about they knew because they would, sorry, this is kind of disgusting, but they would change my diaper before putting me to bed, and by the next morning there would literally be like a puddle under my crib, because when your blood sugar goes super high, then your body tries to flush out all the badness in your system, and so because there's way too much sugar in your system, so it tries to flush it all out, and it ends up you end up using the restroom a ton. So that's how they found out. I remember when I was really, really young, I said, like at the very beginning stages, when I first started going low, that I would hallucinate a ton. And so, which I hear is fairly common. So my blood sugar would go super low, and my parents would try to, help take care of me. And like I said, I still vividly remember this, but I would like start seeing, there was this one time when I thought that there was like teeth coming out of everything. Like people's like face would just start growing random teeth, and so I would freak out and I wouldn't let anybody help me. I wouldn't let people like give me food and stuff because I thought everybody was like a monster trying to attack me. But it's nice because when I got older, I'll honestly, like legitimately still like hallucinate when my blood sugar's super low, but it came to a point like 5 years ago or so that like I would start seeing things and it would occur to me that I was low, and I was like, I need to take care of myself because this stuff around me is not real. So that's most of my memories as like a really little kid was of that and having to use the restroom a lot, which is really what it boils down to. So they're very different. Type 2 most of the time can be prevented, or even if you get it, you can take good enough care of yourself that you can that you won't have it anymore, because the difference between type 1 and 2, the main difference is that as a type 1 diabetic, your pancreas just completely shuts down. It will not produce insulin anymore, versus as a type 2 diabetic, your pancreas is still producing insulin, but your body can't process the insulin for it to work appropriately. So that's why a lot of the time either women who are pregnant have type 2, or because with the little baby it's harder to process all the insulin, or if people are overweight, then they'll often get type 2 diabetes. Sometimes people get type 2 just from eating really unhealthy as well, whether they're overweight or not. But once again, if you like start taking better care of yourself, then generally it can go away. Obviously not with the maternity situation, but after they have their kid, then it'll normally go away, the gestational. And so also as a type 2, if it gets bad enough, then they'll have to start giving shots. But in like the early stages, they normally just have to like take pills for it and stuff. You can't do that as a type 1 diabetic. You have to give yourself shots. You have to put in the insulin and stuff. So they're not really the same disease at all. But people tend to like associate the word diabetes with type 2, which is kind of interesting. But really they're not the same. So if someone's a type 1 diabetic, it doesn't mean that they're unhealthy. Might be, but it doesn't mean that, and it doesn't mean that you're fat or anything. It just means your pancreas stopped working. So they're different diabetes. It's just, or different diseases. It's just the same basic insulin problem that ties them to being both diabetes. So they're really different. They really are. There's just things you have to do throughout the day. I'm kind of bad at taking care of myself, in all reality. I don't take care of myself good. But if you want to manage it well so it doesn't like damage you and you have a chance of living longer, then you really have to be really scheduled and like strict with your life and on top of things. So like in my teen years and even as a kid, you know, life's kind of chaos. You just do whatever you feel like, and it results in me not taking good care of myself. I have to test my blood sugar all the time, so you can't really tell, but my fingers have like all these calluses on both hands to a point where it is sometimes actually difficult to get any blood out of them, because if I try to like poke them, then it you know, there's so many calluses all over them that it won't get through the skin. Yeah, you can't really see them, but they're really gross and calloused. And I have to always carry around my test kit, which I keep in my purse, along with like emergency snacks and stuff for if my blood sugar goes low, which is sometimes frustrating if I have to go to events where they don't let you take food in, and then I have to like push back against them and be like, this is a medical condition, I have to take care of this. And sometimes it's kind of awkward because if I ever eat anything, then I always have to give myself a shot. I'm not on the pump. I just give myself normal shots instead. And so that's a little bit weird sometimes when we're like in restaurants and stuff. And like the other day, so I do this like big sister, little sister program, and I was at a sponsored event for all of the people, and I ended up, they gave us food, so I ended up having to give myself a shot, and by the end of me giving myself a shot, which only takes like 2 minutes, I had like this little crowd of people around me like watching me, and it was kind of weird. So sometimes that's kind of uncomfortable, but yeah, other than that, you just really have to remember to stay on top of things and be as scheduled and have your life together as much as possible to make sure that you can take good care of yourself. So one thing that's like, no matter what treatment you take as far as the insulin itself, you do always have to test your blood sugar to see how high or low your levels are. So blood testing's a consistent thing that you have to do one way or another. I do shots, so I actually have a little thing. So yeah, this is my test kit, test strips, the meter that shows what your blood sugar is, and this is to stab my fingers. I actually keep needles and vials of insulin in here too. So this is just my normal insulin. Now I say normal insulin because I also have a long-acting insulin that I give twice a day. It has like a 12-hour period where the hormones in it just like consistently release the insulin, so you don't, to try to keep your blood sugar steady, because like normal people, their body is like consistently releasing insulin to keep their blood sugar levels steady. But as a diabetic, since, you know, our bodies don't do that, then there's long-acting insulins like Lantus and Levemir, which, like I said, I give twice a day. Some people only give them once a day just to keep it steady throughout the day. If you're on a pump, which is like a little, it's hard to describe. It's like a little thing that you have attached to you. So there's a tube that is put into your body that you leave in there for a 3-day time period. 3 days. You're supposed to only leave it there for 3 days, but most people leave it in there for weeks, honestly, because nobody listens to the government. But if you have one of those, then you have a thing called a basal rate, where the pump just like pushes a little bit of insulin into you every like quarter of an hour. So every 15 minutes just drips a little bit of insulin into your body rather than having long-acting insulin. That's how it takes care of it. I was on the pump for a while, so I do know what that's like. It's kind of nice-ish because then you don't have to consistently stab yourself. You just, you know, put in the pump site I changed it about once a week. And then whenever you need to give a shot, then you just pull up the little, it has like a little, like a a meter thing. I don't even know how to describe it. It has a little interface where you can then say, I had this many carbs, and you put in your carb to insulin ratio. So that depends on like how much your body has a tolerance to the insulin or whatever. So a common carb to insulin ratio is you give 1 unit of insulin for every 10 carbs. And so you always put that in when you first get the pump, so it already knows what that is. And so then when you eat, you just say, hey, I had this many carbs, and it automatically does the math to know how much insulin you need. Or if your blood sugar goes high for whatever reason, then you do the same thing. You also have a insulin to blood glucose, I can't talk, ratio. Mine is I give 1 unit of insulin for every 30 over 120 is what it is. So like as a diabetic, you're supposed to keep your blood glucose within like 80 to 120-ish. And so for every 30 points above 120, I'll give a unit of insulin. And you do the same thing with the pump. You'll put in what your level is, and then like what the how many units it is per number above whatever your target is. And then you'll just put in your blood sugar, and it'll do the math once again for you to figure out how much insulin you need. So those are the main like treatments is either the insulin shots itself or the pump. There's also these things that were released within the last couple of years that are called continuous glucose monitors, which are super, super nice. And they're basically like, it's like a pump, except for instead of pumping insulin into you, it's just a little sensor that you put into your body. And so you'll only test your blood sugar like twice a day to calibrate it. And then the rest of the time it senses where your blood glucose levels are like continuously throughout the day, so that you always know like whether you're going up really high or going down really fast. And that's like something that's a huge lifesaver, because otherwise you just have to kind of like try to sense from your body if you're feeling gross, then check your blood sugar and see if there's something wrong. So that's like a huge like step towards good treatment as well. And those are like the main treatment things that you have really, is testing your blood sugar and giving insulin, whether that's through a pump or through insulin, and whether you're testing your blood sugar is through the test kit or through the continuous glucose monitor. The other thing is, if you do just use the test kit, you're supposed to check at least 4 times a day. They shoot for it to be like 4 to 7 times a day. So you're like literally constantly stabbing your fingers. So yeah, so that's taking care of your diabetes. When you have low blood sugar, well, yeah, you do start feeling faint and start feeling like you're gonna pass out. It feels like you're starving. Your body quite literally is starving. So you will feel like you're starving. You'll want to eat everything within sight. So the main way that I'll know that my blood sugar is going low is I'll start to get a little bit lightheaded. Although that's kind of, I'll get lightheaded whether my blood sugar is going high or low. It's just if I'm getting lightheaded, then I'll know that something's wrong with my blood sugar and I should start testing. So yeah, you'll kind of get at least me, I'll get a pit in my stomach and start getting really, really, really hungry. I also get emotionally distressed. Like fairly recently, actually, I was trying to make a little breakfast dish where you cut out the middle of the toast and you put the egg in it and everything. I was trying to make that, and my blood sugar was low and I didn't realize it, and so I burned it and I completely had like a complete breakdown. I just fell apart, I like collapsed. I was like, no, I ruined it. So this sounds silly, but being like emotionally distressed often is like a sign of your blood sugar being too low. You'll be a little bit more emotionally unstable. As it progresses, if you leave it alone, if you don't take care of it immediately for one reason or another, it really varies per person. Like I said, I had a friend growing up who, when his blood sugar went low, he would just be out and he would start seizing just on, right there, then and there. I don't normally do that unless I'm in a place where it's very busy, if there's a lot going on. If, like I said, most of the time, the only times that I can like distinctly remember it happening is when I was playing video games. So there was a ton going on the screen and noise and just everything happening. My brain couldn't process it well enough and I started seizing. But although Brandon has told me that I had seizures when I was already in a comatose state anyway, which makes, you know, more sense too. But I don't generally just pass out and do that. The biggest thing about like the hallucinations is you just can't process anything in your brain. So the lightheadedness will start, the world starts spinning. The lightheadedness turns from just lightheadedness to, I would assume like a drug trip. I wouldn't know from firsthand experience, but I do actually know that some people will like illegally purchase insulin to get that effect. Will, like, people that are not diabetics will give themselves extra insulin to get the effect of being low, because you'll just start, I don't know, you'll just start hallucinating. Everything gets all twisty and spinny and you can't see straight, and then you start seeing things from, I would assume, from things that are around you. I mean, when I was little and I would imagine teeth, I would imagine that's because people talked to me. I saw teeth, and then my brain just started thinking that teeth were everywhere, you know? And one of the last times that I distinctly remember hallucinating, I was at one of my great aunt and uncle's house, and they had all of these, they had this closet that was open, like one of those sliding door closets, and they had like all these old-fashioned clothes in there. And when I started hallucinating, I literally like thought that the clothes had like come out of the closet, were like dancing around the room. It sounds so dumb, but like I said, that was like at the time where I looked at it and I was like, what is going on? And then I was like, oh, this isn't real. So at least in my experience, I'm fairly sure that all my hallucinations have come from like real things around me. My brain just starts twisting it into other weird things instead. The biggest caution at that point, that's kind of like my low point. If I start hallucinating, then like I'm like my really low point in the low. At that point, the biggest issue is if you're coherent enough to know that you need to go get food, just be very careful, because the world around you will spin and it's not easy to stay on your feet. So it's, and even actually in the earlier stages before I'll start hallucinating and stuff, it's really hard to like stand up and walk in a straight line. It's, like I said, it's kind of like being drunk a little bit. So that's really kind of the deterioration of my lows. I've never gotten to a worse point than that. Although one thing that I would caution against is if you do start getting to that point, don't go to sleep as much as you want to, because then you won't be taking care of yourself. You need to make sure to eat food first, because before like just laying down and passing out, or else, you know. The coma state, I'm completely out of it. There's a one time I can kind of sort of remember one of my comatose states. Like I said, the only seizure that I can like really remember was I was playing Portal 2 with one of my good friends, and Brandon was doing something next to me. I don't even know what he was doing, but we were playing the video game, and it was really distressing because I was like trying to, you know, make my character do stuff, and I couldn't look at the screen because my eyes kept like fluttering back, and that's really, I was just really distressed because I couldn't, I don't I don't think I realized what was really happening in my mind. I just couldn't look in one place. I was like trying to focus on something and I couldn't because I was just everywhere. Like, I don't know. That's my eyes just wanted to go, roll back. They I couldn't look in one direction or anything. So that's really all I remember about that specific seizure. I don't even remember getting out of that. I don't remember what happened there. Normally if I'm in like a comatose state, actually I was in one I was in half of one this morning. It wasn't as bad as some of them have been. I don't remember a whole lot about what's going on in that state. I do know sometimes I'll have like these weird lucid dreams, and it's really confusing when I come out of them because I won't know. Well, let me back up a second. If I go into a diabetic coma in the first place, although my blood sugar might be normal in like half an hour after eating something, it will take me hours to fully be back on my feet and in reality. Because coming out of it is kind of like lucid dreaming. So there was like this one time when I needed to go to work and I woke up and I knew my blood sugar was low. And so I like ate tons of stuff because I wasn't in a good enough state of self-control to not just stuff my face full of everything. And so I did, and then I literally right after eating just laid back down and fell asleep, but I thought that I got up and went to the bathroom and puked everything up, and then I thought I went to work, and I thought I crashed my car, and I thought I came home after crashing my car and laid down in my bed, and then I like actually woke back up, and it was really weird that entire day, because then I was like, I went to work and I was like, okay, I didn't crash my car. Walked outside and realized that everything was like normal, and it was, I don't know, it was just weird because like I said, it took hours after I like passed back out, but I thought that everything was like real at that point. And so it took me through like till like half of the day when I was actually at work to fully process that I did not crash my car, I did not get fired, I did not puke everything up that I had eaten, I did not do any of these things. I don't know. That's really all I can remember from those time periods. And it's, like I said, it's like dreaming. You don't even really remember everything that's going on. You just remember little bits and pieces of things here and there. So you might say things that you don't even know what you're saying too. I don't know. So the hardest things are really when things go wrong, when you don't take good enough care of yourself. So either when your blood sugar goes really low or when it goes really high, because it doesn't matter who you are, it doesn't matter how good you are at taking care of yourself, it's going to happen at some point in your life. And it's awful. It really is, because if you go high enough to go into ketoacidosis, I've only done it like twice in my life, but both times I ended up in the ICU. It was like not fun at all. Like it's completely miserable. You can't breathe, you can barely move, you're just like throwing up constantly, the world around you is spinning. It kind of feels a little bit like being drunk, except for constantly, and you can't get rid of it. There's nothing you can do to help yourself. And then so for a lot of diabetics, when you just go low, a lot of them will just pass out. I had a close friend growing up who was also diabetic, who when his blood sugar would go low, he would literally just start seizing. He would just collapse and seize. It really depends on your genetics. I tend to like have a little bit higher of a tolerance. So if my blood sugar goes low, I tend to be still a fairly functional human being to the point where I can go get myself food and stuff to take care of myself. But at the same time, if I like am asleep and my blood sugar goes low, then I just won't wake up. My husband has to then deal with me because he'll be like, babe, wake up, and if anything, I'll like roll over, and that's the extent of my response. I just don't respond because I'm not getting enough sugar to my brain to be able to process everything that I need to. And in circumstances like that, it's scary. You can't take care of yourself. And honestly, there have been times too where this doesn't happen to me very often, but there have been times where so I'm a huge gamer. I love video games. There have been times when my blood sugar would go super low while I was gaming, and I was so involved in what I was doing that I wouldn't notice. And all the action and the intensity of everything would make me like start seizing as well. So those are the biggest challenges, is those kinds of things when you aren't taking good enough care of yourself. It's awful. It's miserable. And honestly, the biggest thing that I can say to support is, this is going to sound awful, but don't leave diabetics alone. I mean, for certain time periods, maybe, but whether you're like in college or whatever, you need to make sure somebody always has your back, because there may be a time when you can't wake up one morning, or there may be a time when you're in ketoacidosis and you can barely function because you are throwing your lungs up and you can't get yourself to the hospital. You can barely see straight in front of you. You need to make sure to always have somebody that'll be able to take you to the hospital. It'll be able to shove food down your throat, basically. There's actually these things, I actually forgot to mention this during the treatment question that you asked me. They're called Glucagon Shots. They are quite literally, there's like these little vials filled with sugar, basically, that you then and then there's like another vial full of like this weird like saline solution. You mix them together and put them in a needle, and it's used for emergencies when you're in a diabetic coma and you can't wake up because your blood sugar is so low, where you mix the solution together and you literally just shoot sugar straight into their body. Just stab them and put the sugar straight into them to take care of them. So, I mean, obviously, if you're in a comatose state, you can't do that yourself. So it's always good to go through, like, if there's a loved one that's close to you that has diabetes, to go through training on how to either coax diabetics into eating stuff if their blood sugar is low, or to learn how to give the glucagon shot, or both preferably, and to once again just always have their back, because you don't know when they're not going to be able to take care of themselves. And one other thing on top of that is that in those like states when you, as a diabetic, whether you're in a comatose state or you're in ketoacidosis, one way or another, just always keep in mind that they are still them, that diabetic is still that person. Even if they're having a seizure, the way you treat them, they'll remember. My husband sometimes hates it because he'll like get frustrated at me sometimes when I am in a low, because my brain isn't working properly, so I won't want to eat. I'll like try to refuse the stuff, and he'll get frustrated with me because he's like, you need to take care of yourself. And when I actually come out of the low, I'll be like super angry at him, because even though your brain isn't fully functioning, the way you treat a diabetic during that time period, I guarantee you they will remember, and it'll come back. And one other thing, sorry, I'm kind of ranting, but one other thing along those same lines is this is going to sound really silly, but if you are going to have a diabetic's back in the first place, if you're going to sign up to help take care of them, you pretty much have to be consistently good to them too, because once again, when you're in that state of mind where you can't think straight, you'll come down to your base instincts. And if there's someone that's normally not kind to you, or someone you don't trust that tries to help you, you will refuse their trust. Every diabetic I've ever known does that, because you can't really think straight, so you can't really tell yourself, hey, this person's trying to help me right now. So if it's somebody that you don't normally trust, then you're not gonna be able to help them as easily. So if you're gonna want to take care of a diabetic, you need to like be consistent in always being good to them and always taking care of them and always letting them know that you're there, whether they're in that comatose state or whether they're just barely going a little bit low and need your help. You just need to be consistent in that way. So carb counting is always nice. So if you ever have like prepackaged foods, always make sure that you keep the labels, because they'll always have the total carbohydrates listed on it. When you first get diagnosed with diabetes, they'll take you through carb counting training on like counting carbs for foods that don't have nutrition labels, like apples, potatoes, things like that. But if it's anything prepackaged, treats, anything like that, just make sure that you keep the labels. And don't assume that diabetics can't eat sugar. We can have as much sugar as we want. It doesn't matter. We just need to make sure to give ourselves enough insulin. So it's the nutritional labels that matter, and it makes all of us upset when you insist on only giving us sugar-free stuff, because it doesn't taste nearly as good. So sugar-free is not the way to go. Just make sure you have the nutritional labels. Well, I was pregnant at one time, and piece of advice for any females who are considering getting pregnant: don't do it if you're diabetic unless you have like amazing control, because as soon as you get pregnant, well, as I had mentioned before, and it's kind of common knowledge, there's gestational diabetes. When women get pregnant, they often get diabetes for a short period of time during their pregnancy. So when you're already diabetic, getting pregnant just makes it worse. And so everything that you knew about taking care of your diabetes gets totally flipped upside down and you don't know anything anymore. It's like getting re-diagnosed all over again. So you want to make sure to be like really on top of things to be able to adequately take care of yourself and be able to relearn how to take care of yourself during the pregnancy period. The other negative thing is that it continuously changes, because as the baby gets bigger and bigger and bigger, you once again have to change how you're taking care of yourself basically every month. It's like I said, it's like getting re-diagnosed just over and over and over. So it's not very fun. The other thing is, if you don't take good care of yourself, you will kill that child, which is not fun at all. So don't get pregnant unless you're really good at taking care of yourself. It's just not a good experience. And it can, like I said, if you don't take amazing care of yourself, you will end up killing the child, and there's a high possibility that you can kill yourself too. So just not a good idea. Like I said, I don't completely recommend against getting pregnant like ever as a diabetic, but just know if you do, you can't have other obligations. Don't work at the same time. Don't do anything else at the same time, because your number one focus is going to have to be taking care of yourself to be able to take care of the baby. So I do know gestational is treated a little bit more like type 2, since it's not like a permanent thing. Except for I'm under the impression that they still want you to give shots rather than take any medications, because they don't want to hurt the child. I guess the only other thing is, if you're already a diabetic and you end up getting pregnant in the first place, it's not good to manage it with a pump. Because the main place where you keep pump sites is in your stomach. And that's actually why I went off of the pump, was because I got pregnant and I just never went back on after. So it's really not a good idea to have a pump while you are pregnant. But really, other than that, I don't have any great insights as to just normal gestational, because I've never had normal gestational. So yeah. There's not a cure for type 1. There's not a cure. There have been studies that have been going on recently where they think that some people, not everybody, but some people don't actually have diabetes, as weird as that sounds. But so diabetes will often get passed on via genetics, hence why I can't donate blood or plasma or anything like that, because then, you know, my body materials being in someone else's can give them my disease. Because of that, there's been a study that's been going on recently where they think that they can maybe, and I don't know what the results of this have been, it's probably still going on because it got brought up to me at the beginning of this year, reverse the effects of diabetes in some people that were diagnosed before like the age of 3, because they think that it might have just been like a certain gene in one of their parents had shut things down in their body, but their body, like their pancreas, can still produce insulin. It's just being told not to because of a genetic thing. And my dad's a type 1 diabetic, and so I had considered going into the study, but then my insurance changed, and then I couldn't go into it anymore. So that's something that they're looking into, but that, like I said, even if that is the case, and I don't think there's any, you know, firm yes or no on that, that still wouldn't be a solution for everybody, and it would only be if you were diagnosed when you were super, super small, because a good portion of people that are diagnosed like between the ages like 8 and 18, and if you are diagnosed in those ages, that's not a help to you in the first place, and there's no cure. You're stuck with it for life. I do know that they are looking at trying to, they've actually been looking at this for a long time, trying to like create basically new pancreases for us. But there are a couple problems with that. Stem cell research. I will just outright say I hate people that are against stem cell research, so I'm sorry if you are. But stem cell research is how they would have to, you know, basically generate new pancreases for us. And there's such a pushback against it that a lot of the progress in that research has, you know, been halted. The other problem is that even when stem cell research has, you know, progressed, they still need to figure out a way to make it, since it is in essence an autoimmune disorder, they need to make it so your body won't then just attack the new pancreas as well. And I don't think there's any breakthroughs in that either. So no cure yet. I know that they're also they're like developing a weird like robotic pancreas thing-ish that they're looking at doing, but I don't know if you would consider that a cure. It's kind of like having a pacemaker. Like it doesn't cure anything, it just, you'd have a robotic pancreas. But we don't really, that's just a concept, an idea. So that's it. There's no escape. You are stuck with it. It's normally discovered by, honestly, kids having to use the restroom like an excessive amount. It's really obvious. If a little kid is asking to use the restroom every half hour, it's pretty good to take them to the doctor and see, because you'll never know from them going low, because obviously there's no insulin that's going into them. So it'll always be from their blood sugar being really high that you'll start to see the symptoms. And it's normally easiest to see based on how often they're using the restroom. So if your school starts complaining that your kid's going to the bathroom way too much, then it's time to go take them to a doctor. They'll always do a blood test. If you happen to know somebody that has a meter to test their blood sugar, then that's a great way to find out. If it's over like 300, then actually if it's over 100, then they're definitely diabetics, because the average blood glucose for non-diabetics is like 60, but that's not normal for diabetics. But anyway, but if you're starting to see symptoms, it'll be above 300 for sure. And that's how you know. There's also, this is going to sound really gross, but if you have like a really little kid and they're peeing a lot, if they're in diapers, smell their pee. That sounds gross, but it'll have a sweet smell to it because it'll have way too much sugar. So that's a great way to know that you should then take them to the doctor, and then they'll do several blood tests on them. They normally just do, in this day and age, they'll just do little finger pricks and they can test it that way. Pretty easy, just like one of these little things that I carry around in my purse. and that's how you find out. So what you eat doesn't directly impact the diabetes in and of itself, but everything you eat will have different effects. The sugar misconception definitely is from type 2. Because as a type 2, as I mentioned, it's normally from bad eating habits that you'll start to build up more of a tolerance to the insulin. So it's, you know, better to just not eat bad. But as a type 1 where you're not producing insulin anyway, it doesn't hurt to eat sugar. Now, is it great for you? No, it's not great for you whether you're diabetic or not. So it actually has basically the same effect. You just want to make sure to give a shot for it. The biggest problem is that when you eat sugar, diabetic or not, it'll spike your sugars up, which is where you get the sugar high from. But because of that, it, you know, spikes your sugars up as a diabetic too. So you just need to make sure to give a shot beforehand and then not stress about it for the next half an hour. Because if you have something like a continuous glucose monitor, if you eat a cupcake, your glucose monitor is going to like freak out and like spike up. But if you've already given a shot right before eating, then it'll come back down. It just takes like half an hour-ish. So that's one thing with like sugar specifically, but it's all just how, I mean, with sugary things like cupcakes and cake and pie and all that good nonsense, they're fast-acting sugars, so you get the spikes so high. That's also actually the same thing for like breads and pastas, have basically the same effect as those sugary things. There's other things like meat. Meat is literally the worst thing as a diabetic. I love it, but it is so hard to manage because meat takes about 6 hours to break down and start affecting you. So there's a thing, if you have a pump, you can put it in, I don't remember exactly what it's called, but you can basically say that you're having this meat and you need to get a shot 6 hours from then for when that all breaks down and gets processed in your body. I honestly think like sugary things, fast-acting sugars are easier to deal with just because it's right then and there rather than having to worry about it hours later. Not to say that you shouldn't eat meat, and honestly, it's actually a really good idea to eat like meats and proteins and stuff if you're like going on a hike or something, because then it will kick in later when you're out and about and being active, which is right when you need it to. So you just, I guess, have to keep those things in mind when you're eating. It's not that you can't eat any of it, just keep in mind how it's going to affect your blood sugars in the future. The exercise, actually, once again, I don't know the science behind this, but exercising also helps break down the sugars in your blood. So if you exercise a ton, then it'll drive your blood sugar lower. So it's always good if you are a diabetic and you exercise heavily to just keep in mind to back off on the insulin a little. Not completely, you still need to have the insulin there, but the exercising definitely makes it so that your blood sugar goes lower. So that's always something good to keep in mind if you are one to work out a ton. It's good to exercise on a regular basis anyway, because it'll just kind of help your blood sugar stay like more steady. So I do know people actually that don't. I had mentioned before the long-acting insulin that I use Lantus specifically. I have known people that don't use long-acting insulin. They still have to use insulin whenever they eat anything, exercise or not. You have to give a shot when you eat. But they can keep their blood sugars steady throughout the day just by consistently working out throughout the day. Not like at the gym all day long, but consistently being up and moving and active throughout the day. It'll keep your blood sugars more steady. So, well, I don't know all of the science behind it. I just know that the insulin is the stuff that basically breaks down the sugar that you consume or that comes from breaking down other parts of your body, because it can like break down your muscles and stuff too. But anyway, so it just breaks down like the glucose in your blood to like be used for energy and all that good jazz. I don't know all the exact science behind it, because that's I do math, not science, but I do know that that's the purpose of insulin, and that's the problem with not having something in your body that'll break down the sugar to be used properly throughout your body, and just nutrients in general. It's not just like sugar in and of itself. It's literally the glucose in everything, like meats, vegetables, everything has the glucose in it that needs to be broken down and distributed properly throughout your body. So yeah, that's what the insulin is important for. And it's also important because, and I don't know why this happens, once again, because I don't know the science behind it, but if you have like super high levels of sugar in your blood, it'll actually start turning your blood like poisonous. So there's this phenomena when you're a diabetic called diabetic ketoacidosis, where your blood sugars are like way too high for a long enough period of time that it will turn your blood acidic. So you end up having to go to the hospital and getting it all flushed out. And so that's not fun. I don't know why it does that. I just know that the more sugar in your blood, the more your blood turns toxic. So there you go. That's really as much as I know about the science behind why you need insulin and what it does. So when you're in like a semi-comatose state, like especially when you're first coming out of a low, and so you're like not fully comatose anymore, but you're not really there either. I don't know. He's right. I won't remember like the exact things that were said. So yeah, but I can still process things well enough to know how I was treated. So I'll remember if I feel, there have been many a times when we've had discussions, because we've only been married a year, so he's still getting used to taking care of me. Yeah, it'll take years to really become good at it. There's my other little tidbit. But there have been discussions that we've had after me coming out of a low where I will be upset at him because I'll be like, I felt like you were being really demeaning to me that whole time. I felt like you were treating me like a child, and I'm not. I'm an adult still. Yeah, I act a little bit differently during that time period, but if I feel like he's being demeaning or I feel like he's being angry, I will remember that. I may not remember the exact words he said, but I will remember how he made me feel, and it'll stick with me. And then, as I had mentioned before, it makes it harder than the next time that he tries to take care of me. He's been a lot better recently, but the first couple times, because then I didn't want help from him the next time, because I would remember that the last time I was in that state, he made me feel bad. So it would be more difficult for him to get me to eat food or to take care of myself. So that's really what it boils down to.
Yeah.